Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception to ideas on the page through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm Rae Deslich SDSA, and today I'm pleased to welcome set decorator Tina Jones SDSA and production designer Kristian Milsted to discuss their imaginative collaboration on the ambitious and beautifully executed Amazon fantasy series, The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, Season 2. Tina and Kristian, thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm so happy to talk to you about this series because it's absolutely beautiful, and I think it's a wonderful entry into the Lord of the Rings series. How did you come to work on this project, and what attracted you to it?
I think for me, when I first heard about the project, it was a bit like going back to my Game of Thrones days, and I just knew how potentially exciting it was going to be, because in that genre you can just do anything and create anything. It was just completely magical. So probably for the first time in my career, I actually chased Kristian and found out who was designing it, and actually made a cold call to say, "Are you looking for anybody?" And I'd never done that before, but I think it was because I was just so excited by the project, and I just wanted to be a part of it. So that's how we came to be together. I basically doorstepped him. And if he had sat, I probably would have stalked him a bit as well, maybe. But anyway, we chatted about it, and he asked me to do it with him. So yeah, it was very exciting.
That's wonderful. Kristian, what about you?
Yeah, so I was approached by the makers, so the showrunners and producers of the show, and we had a meeting, and it didn't take me much to convince me to. I mean, I was super excited about it. It was at the time when they approached me, they were still just about finishing season 1 in New Zealand. So it was a Zoom call, and I'm based in the UK, in London, and so when I heard that they're moving the show to London, it's super exciting, and I'm a big kind of Tolkien fan. Watched all the movies, read the books. It was like, real fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, so you as well were super excited about this project and really almost pursued it, or really tried to get on it. I think that really shows in your enthusiasm for the project. What were your initial conversations like with the directors and the showrunners? Did they have any sort of overarching creative or aesthetic directives for you for this season as opposed to last season?
Well, for me, I obviously came on a lot later than Kristian had. And so we were left a huge resource from season 1. And they had put together some great volumes of each world, and what was the sort of basic idea behind each world, the colors and the textures. And so we followed that to a certain extent, obviously, because we weren't able to actually view what they'd shot on season 1. They were very sort of guarded about who could actually see this material. So we didn't have anything to follow particularly, but we did have all the references. So it was from Kristian's wonderful concepts, and sitting down with him and chatting through what he had already sort of gathered from the showrunners and director, and gradually putting our world together.
Kristian, I've read that the showrunners wanted or have said in other media that this season was going to be darker than the previous one, just because of the progression of time into, you know, the events as they happen. That was one of the influences, obviously, in your directive. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was thematically the season 2 goes in a much darker place with, you know, following Sauron and his you know, his deeds corrupting everybody he meets. And I think it's always exciting for us when we get to do like many layers of a visual take on these worlds. And I think so. Tina mentioned we were still we kind of joined the project in between season 1 and season 2, but and then so the showrunners and producers were very busy editing and, you know, working on post on season 1. And so we kind of had a good amount of time, I felt, to create some images that was based on obviously what had been established in season 1, but to kind of maybe kind of go deeper within some of the worlds. I think we had 12 returning sets that came over from season 1. Each of those were slightly changed or adapted in some way or another. We didn't receive full sets, even though a lot of the stuff was shipped over. We kind of most of it was built from scratch, but obviously some of the drawings we would follow from season 1. But I would say it was great to. I think the story went deeper into each world, whether it was Linden or Eregion or the Dwarven worlds, and you know, it was. And I think we learned also from what they were doing in season 1 and what the showrunners had learned from season 1. You know, there's a certain melancholy about the elves. They're kind of they're dying. They might have to leave Middle Earth completely, and so I think we had many different, you know, tonally ways to go with these different sets that we created, and that made it hugely challenging, but also really enjoyable. You know, every elf, dwarf, man are all kind of going into a much darker and struggling to kind of avoid the temptation of Sauron, and yeah. It was a very visually very interesting journey, I found.
I think that was what was so exciting about it, that we were taking it into a different realm, even though we hadn't actually been able to see season 1. I think actually you hadn't you, Kristian? So we were just very aware the whole time that we were taking it into a much darker place, which you know, has its own exciting sort of attributes, because you're going somewhere I think that people wouldn't normally associate with Tolkien.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you think of Tolkien and you think of, you know, high fantasy, and everything is, the elves are glowing and the dwarves are strong and loyal, and it's very, you know, lawful good, as the Dungeons and Dragons folks would say, and this is like the darker, gritty Lord of the Rings. Almost. Yeah. Where did you start with the color palettes, especially for each of the different realms that you had to portray in this season?
Well, we had the Bibles that we were handed, or set deck were handed over from the previous set deck department, sort of gave us rough ideas of color palettes that they would use, and whether or not that world, like with the elven world, would use a lot of natural, almost sort of like Art Nouveau style imagery. And so we had a really good grounding to go by. And it was, from our point of view, that was quite exciting, because we were following a palette that had sort of roughly been put together, but had a wide scope for us to change it and to make it our own. And so we didn't necessarily stick really rigidly to that. Obviously, we took it wherever season 2 and the design parameters were pushing it. We didn't sort of strictly stick to exactly what was given us in these Bibles, but it just gave us a good basic and a good basis to work to as well. Mm-hmm. It's quite difficult because you need to, I always find, you want to be inspired, but you don't really want to be inspired by somebody else's work necessarily, because you have to create it and make it your own. So we were very aware of that we were creating new interiors and new worlds, but we were also having to be quite faithful to the old ones that had previously been used in season 1.
That must be so hard. You're almost making your own co-interpretation of the reference material at the same time that season 1 is.
Yeah.
And then you have to make sure that they literally exist in the same world.
Yeah, that's why you almost had to look at the Bibles. You had to study them, but not completely take that on board. Otherwise, you would maybe be going down the wrong route. You know, you had to really take from it what you thought was necessary for that particular set, and then adapt it and darken it up a bit, throw a bit of mud in. But you know, it was also, you know, it was probably, we had the advantage because we weren't working in COVID times like they had with season 1. So we, you know, the world was our oyster really, and we had an incredible manufacturing team and prop team that were putting everything, you know, making everything for the sets, because it was just something you couldn't just go and buy off the shelf. So a lot of the furniture that populated Kristian's set all had to be manufactured, designed and manufactured.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It's, you know, none of it exists in our world that, you know, currently stands. All of it is outside of that world.
Yeah, and it is human nature to want to make something better, you know, whatever anybody says. So you've got something from season 1 and you think to yourself, okay, you know, how can we enhance this and make it maybe look better or make it more of an impact? Because like I say, we hadn't seen it on the screen, so we didn't know what impact it carried beforehand. So I think that's why I've chosen a clip from The Forge, because I think that as a set was just incredible. You know, Kristian just built this incredible forge that was producing these rings, which are the most important sort of prop in the whole of Tolkien's world, really. So yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. Kristian, I actually have a different question for you. In your other media, you mentioned that you built more of these sets for season 2 than were built for season 1. So like Tina said, you received a lot of the sets in shipment. So you had a starting point, but then the directive from the showrunners and the show in general, I think, was to expand those sets. Is that correct?
That's correct. So an example of that is the court in Linden, the set that with the big tree in one end, and it was a beautifully designed set, which was like a natural forest with these majestic trees, was sitting on a large stage that was surrounded in blue screen. So what they found out was that, you know, it's terribly expensive to create a forest. Like in each setup, in each shot, we'll have to have a forest put around it. So what we did on season 2 was that, and the wish from the producers and the showrunners was to try to get more in camera, is what we call it, you know. So we went right back to an old technique, which is a painted backing. So we're very lucky in the UK. We have some fantastic craftsmen that can still do this. It's really a dying art. I mean, it's not being used so much anymore, and I think it's a shame because you actually get a look which is just fantastic. Obviously, it gives the director and the actors a set that feels and looks like that you're in the middle of some woods. Also, photographically, it can work really well, like classic Hollywood, kind of like a cinematic
Yeah.
style. Maybe if you freeze frame an image here and there, you can see, oh, maybe that's not a real wood, but it feels completely real. And there was a bit of nervousness from some producers and cinematographers, but once it was lit and once we started filming on it, everybody was super happy with it. And it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to do, you know, in that you have to build some of the set first before you can paint the backing, because you're painting the backing to match the set, so to speak. So you have so it is something that is a little time consuming, but compared to like a printed backing or a translite, I in these instances with woods and forests, and kind of organic, it works really well. The other thing that worked really well for us was that we started filming in the autumn, so the shooting period was slightly skewed, maybe because they came from you know, the southern hemisphere and started shooting. So we had all these amazing real forests around near our studios, and they were all in these kind of beautiful autumnal colors that we then used as a main palette for Linden, as you can, both for the court. You can see an image where the Gil-galad is standing by his tower. This another. It's again how we enhanced the set from season one, and we built a tower and we built like a covered walkway on one side of the set, and then on the other side we banked up the ground a bit so that again you could contain most of the shots within the set, and then you shoot off into a backing that is then, so you have a middle distance, and the far distance is then a painted backing, and it's really kind of old school art directing, designing. It works.
And I agree with you. It gives so much of a better effect because, you know, on screen, you can see that it is something physical there. You might not, you know, necessarily believe that it's a tree or whatever, but it's just got a little bit more physicality than a purely CGI background would.
It's very strange because it's painted really, a lot of it is painted quite blocky, like almost out of focus. And the way you need to look at it is you have to kind of squint your eyes, and then you can tell the contrasts and the stuff. So you go around the stage and you see these amazing, there's 3 painters on it for I don't know how many weeks, a few. There it is, yeah. So again, it's but you know, it worked well because of the task of it being like a dying tree in its autumnal forest, and I think we do have the tree regenerating and coming to life after they put on the rings, and so we stepped out the stage for a number of weeks and put leaves on the tree again, but really the lighting was what changed the color of the backing, and we didn't repaint the backing. So it was something we took a little bit of a chance on doing it, and I was promising people that it would definitely work, and I'm very pleased that it did.
That's fantastic. I love, you know, of course, as decorators, as, you know, as film production people ourselves, we love to hear that things are being done practically on set and in camera.
In this clip here, what excited me so much about the forge, when Kristian first showed me some of the concepts, and we were working, my team were working along the concept of creating the actual forge that was to sit inside the set. I think it's very easy to use the term Art Nouveau because it's one that everybody understands, but you're really looking at natural forms and natural patterns that are made easily in nature. But if you were to look at some of like the design on the hammer, that comes actually much, much earlier from than Art Nouveau, because you will see designs like this, as early as sort of 13th century, because people looked to nature for the beautiful designs that were naturally created. And I think that's why I loved this set so much, because it was in the windows, the stained glass windows, and then the architecture. And then we carried it through onto all of the furniture and the tools that he used. And the whole ring making process obviously was really important to us. And in fact, one of the first things that Kristian and I worked on was the idea that we wanted them to naturally be able to go close up to our rings without having to do a visual effect, which they, I believe, had done in season 1. And so we all love a challenge. So we wanted to produce these rings for real, which we had to do in-house. We found a ring maker. Myself and the prop master went off and did a course in ring making just over a weekend. So we knew, because we wanted to apply very basic rudimentary ring making, we wanted to look at the process that would have been used almost in medieval times. And that's how we came up with the whole routine. And even these little instruments that held each ring were based on designs from a real jeweler's bench that you would have had. Our ring maker we brought her in, and she went through the whole process with the actor. So he basically knew exactly, how the construction of a piece of jewelry like that went on. Also, in this whole sequence, you see all these beautiful big cogs and wheels behind him that are gently working in the background that Kristian had designed. So it just felt like a proper working forge that was like, had its own heartbeat almost, it was sort of ticking along and creating these there in the background. It's just incredible. Mm-hmm. And it just felt like a proper factory or workshop, that would have been built to actually create these important pieces.
That is the thing that's wonderful about this series, is how you bring the motifs of the set into even the smallest pieces. Every chair in the Elven world has, either a Gothic or some sort of natural motif to it, every piece of furniture. I noticed also in Numenor, there's so many water motifs, and there's just, it's a part of their culture, clearly. It's part of their idioms, and you bring it into so many pieces of their decor and their home building as well, which is really lovely. Yeah, it's got a very Byzantine feel here, and so much of this island feels like it's been, built with like water and stone.
I'd love to just talk about this detail here, because on the capitals of these columns, we had these. I think we had 6 different themes. So we had like an octopus. You can see it in the middle of the. And then we had like these cuttlefish motif. We had a seahorse motif. We had different, and so because it's a temple for an ancient goddess, the weeping goddess, that we kind of riffed off, kind of made her up from different kind of Tolkien lore, but then juxtaposed that with the back wall with this gilded clamshell feature. It's the wall with the candles in it, and that's actually a design that I kind of lifted from Armenian brutalist monument, and so we softened it and made it less kind of brutalist and less concretey. Introduced the gilded finish on inside those seashells, but they are quite simply made. So again, architecturally, I think it really worked. Also with the kind of much more busy elements in there, and also like lots of old buildings have different stages of then they you build onto, you make a new wing, or you finish the end, or some of it falls away. So it's very important that this shrine looked super ancient and special for the believers, the people who adhere to the old ways of the elves. And it's just got a lot of history in it. I think people will appreciate that when they see these spaces, even though it's a shame that they can't walk around in it and kind of soak up all the actual detail that Tina and her team have put into it with everything. It's just, yeah, it was a real special job to work on from start to finish. It's a long project, and it was a busy time, but it was we had a great time, and felt very supported by the production in giving us the tools and the amount of people that we needed to do all this. It was kind of crazy, but I think it was my favorite part of the day when I walked around to all the workshops, to Tina's office, and then we'd go around to the prop makers and check on what they're all up to, and I would then go to the sculptors and see what they're sculpting up, so they could cast it, so they could make it. It's like, again. And I think you also need to remember that a lot of productions, especially, new movies are being made, and they don't have time to do these things in this way. And so it is up to these big, streaming franchises to keep these all these amazing craftsmen busy in an industry which is turning more and more into digital. Which is, I don't have anything against the digital, but it should be a balance of all these things, and yeah, just felt incredibly lucky to have such an amazing pool of talent that could help us, bring this to life.
I just wanted to also touch on what Kristian just said about production, who were incredible in that they not only sort of trusting us with this, but they were so enthusiastic that a lot of productions, they listened to the ideas that we had. I, for a few years, have been in favor of using some brilliant craftsmen within the manufacturing team that were Hungarian blacksmiths, some Hungarian, they're not really carpenters, they're more sort of proper joiners and sort of professional furniture makers. And leather workers. So we had our own sort of departments there. A lot of productions would have not sort of trusted us, but I think they realised that was what was going to produce a wonderful series for them, and it was just great being when we needed some metalworking or some beautiful chandelier. It was there, it was there for us to sort of design, concept, and get made. You could have it the following day. The turnaround was just brilliant. So from a creative point of view, it was there wasn't very much that they said no to. That I think the showrunners had the same sort of excitement as we did, so that when we had our weekly meetings where we were coming up with ideas and showing them concepts, they would greet them with the same enthusiasm, I think, that we had for it as well.
I'm so happy to hear that you all felt very supported and, got a very enthusiastic approach to that from the showrunners. And what Kristian is saying is right. Like, a lot of modern productions are feeling the pressure to just order something from Amazon, or shop at a big box store. And even if you could do that for your production, that is kind of an underrated, wonderful thing about craftspeople, is the turnaround time is perhaps better than Amazon, because you've got the person right there.
Yeah.
And it is so lovely to keep alive a lot of these traditional crafts. And I think that the series shows your use of those craftspeople in doing a lot of close-ups and a lot of really lingering shots on props or items of decor, or even a shot that is like heavily framed by a beautiful custom lantern or something like that. And I would actually love to talk about the lighting in these sets, because there's so much beautiful on-screen lighting that's very in-world. It feels like you almost designed a custom lighting suite for each realm, almost. That like Eregion has its own lighting suites, and Khazad-dûm has its own, set of lanterns and sconces and wall sconces. There's a great post light right there. Yeah. What was your process in doing all this lighting on the set?
Well, yes, that's exactly what you've just said. Each world had its own style and design. And so, we would, for this set, for example, which was absolutely stunning. And it was I think, Kristian, it was one of the first sets that we did, wasn't it? I think, the boathouse. And so we designed this lighting, and my concept guys came up with different options, and I can't remember where the source of these ones came from, because I think we also had the fabulous John Howe, who he produced some lovely drawings for us as well. So the lighting was created in-house for all of our different worlds. We also had some of the lighting from the previous sets from season 1 that we were repeating. We actually changed some of the lighting because the scale for us didn't quite work, and we kept very much to the style, but changed the lighting. But all of this was original for season 2, and that set was just fabulous. It was amazing.
It really is, yeah. All of the lanterns are filled with references either to the architectural style or just to their particular milieu. Like, those feel like they reference steel dock lights that you might still see, down at the docks these days.
Exactly, that's what we would do. We were looking at sort of Dockland early images, and then we were adding our own sort of natural nature Art Nouveau sort of style to it.
Mm-hmm.
But things like in the boathouse, believe it or not, wood shavings like that are very hard to find, because if you go into a conventional wood workshop, it will be tiny thin shavings. Well, not even shavings, it's almost like dust. So a lot of these wood shavings we purchased from I think it was Romania, where they still do a lot of traditional wood carving because the shavings were so much bigger. So things like that. Yeah.
What a unique thing to have to find the right size of wood shavings. I was going to ask the illustrator that you referenced, John Howe.
Yes.
That's not the classic fantasy illustrator John Howe, is it? It is. So he was working as a concept artist for you as well.
John Howe was a big part of season 1, and the showrunners and production absolutely love working with him as they should. He's a genius, and he's a guy who's worked and lived Lord of the Rings, since the Peter Jackson movies, also before, because he was illustrating books and so on and so forth. And he is so the way that we worked, or I worked with John Howe in the beginning, was to almost like take a pass at every idea that I had, and how can he enhance the the truthful kind of original feel of a Lord of the Rings movie, because his knowledge is so vast of what he's been working on for the last 25 years. And so I think it's we're just incredibly lucky. And then because also John Howe is so fast that he just produces drawings at a at a crazy pace. So I couldn't actually keep him busy. So then I spoke to Tina. It's like, Tina, you need to keep John Howe busy for me for a few weeks, because it's just like he's too prolific. So that's when we worked together, Tina and I, and saying, well, he should do a pass on he also worked on the tools, the woodworking tools for the Círdan's boathouse that you saw just now. And so, and again, what I love about his work is that it's not fuzzy, it's not overcomplicated, it's super simple, but it adheres to the world completely, and it's I don't know, it is not very easy to do something so kind of simple and pure in its form. And I think he's one of many concept artists we work with, but definitely John Howe was an integral part of getting that look in in the props, in the dressing, but also in the sets that we built. So yeah, he's a genius.
Yeah.
Most of his work were pencil drawings, weren't they?
Yeah.
Or just very, very simple sketches. So there was no color added. Exactly as Kristian said, they were just very simple, but hit it spot on. I mean, he did some fabulous rings for us as well, didn't he? And then we would take those drawings and give them to concept artists who would put the color and the solidity. Yeah, exactly, these rings. And so a lot of the basis of the designs would have come from John Howe. And this was an interesting prop because Louise, the director, wanted to display the rings and for you to see them sort of quite quickly and clearly. And so there were little sort of we tried it with little magnets under the sort of black textured rock around the bowl. So all of that was made in-house.
Yeah, it's a very unique form for ring stands. And that's a great thing for the Lord of the Rings is, it doesn't look like something every day. It's a completely different imagining of, if you were a different culture, if you lived in a different environment, what sort of a ring stand would you make? I love that John Howe was involved, because that's so full circle. He's known, I think, for in the non-film world for doing book covers for all of the classic fantasy novels. And so he's sort of inspired already what people have in their heads for the Lord of the Rings series. And then for him to be involved in bringing it to screen, echoing what people have been carrying in their heads for decades visually, really makes it a full circle moment. And I think that's so lovely that they incorporated almost like a legacy talent in the fantasy world.
And the wonderful thing about him as well is that he's not precious in any way. He loves collaborating. He just loves getting stuck in. So, sometimes we would take a drawing, one of his drawing. Well, they look pencil, but he actually does use a tablet. But it is he does both. But we would use elements of his designs within other designs. So it was like a stage of it was just having your own master craftsmen, artists, and for our production. I mean, he worked on other productions as well at the same time, but he gave us a lot of his time for season 2, and I think we really benefited from that. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about the Linden, the Grey Havens, is that that's a backlot set that we built on, so you can see it on one of the pages that it was a work in progress model, but most of our sets, if not all the sets, we had obviously when we designed them in mostly in like a 3D CAD world, and then go into quite early on, we will make models of it, physical models, so we can have a look at it, and everybody can understand the model and say, this is what we're building. We're not building the fjord. We're not building the big mountains around the fjord, but we are building this. And again, it just gives clarity to the whole production, and it makes people think as well, from the VFX department, the cinematographers, the lighting, the gaffers, everything. They can actually stand there and look at it. Okay, and that's going to go on the back lot, and we're going to orientate it this way so that the sun will come there, but we can light it. It's like, again, it is using tried and tested methods that just mini production don't have time to do. And tonally, I thought that Grey Havens is such an iconic place in Middle Earth, and having the opportunity to both show like it's a dockyard, but it's also like an arsenal. Like the elven warships are setting out from there to go and fight Sauron. So it's, again, it was important that it could do many things, but it is also like the gateway to the elven lands. We didn't travel very much on this show. We built most of the stuff on our backlots or inside our sound stages. So again, creating everything as we did with the props and the dressing, really also the look of many of these environments are created from scratch, trying not to copy any one. It's not a Norwegian fjord. It's not a New Zealand fjord. It's a something kind of Middle Earth like that. It can be real. You feel it needs to. And that's another note that we got from the showrunners, was that and the producers, like, everything really needs to feel real, but obviously in a fantasy world. But imagine that you could go to the planet Middle Earth and you could walk around there. Then it needs to feel like everything is real.
Mm-hmm. Tina, would you like to talk about dressing the rune sets, particularly like the Stour Canyon and Tom Bombadil's house and things like that?
The Bombadil set was really interesting because Kristian had concepts and a good idea of how this was meant to be the interior of what we'd shot in Tenerife. And so that whole set, we actually found some craftsmen that were making furniture out of pieces of driftwood that had washed up on the beach down in southern England. And so a lot of our furniture came via her. We'd actually, again, I'm pretty sure it was something that John Howard sketched that Kristian liked. And then we showed this to this furniture maker, and she came up with a selection of pieces for us. And so everything was made to look as if it had been sourced in the land, this very barren land. So it would have been sun-bleached pieces of wood and maybe bits of stone and shell that he'd found. The set was incredible. It was absolutely incredible because it, again, had wonderful lighting. We wanted to sort of like have this lovely twinkly feeling of candles everywhere, and how he had sort of tried to light his home. and yeah, I think it came off really well. It was sort of at least 2-3 times a week, meeting up with Kristian and walking him around the workshops. So all of the props and furniture, everything that was being made, he could put his eye to as well, and make sure that, you know, because we had some scale issues that we had to work out with some of the characters, and just to make sure that everything felt right. Because, you know, again, in some of these worlds, especially with the dwarves, you know, it was the weight of the furniture had to feel right, because it was underground. They were underground, essentially.
And I think, speaking of scale, I think there's some, you know, perspective tricks that are being played to accentuate the differences between different folks. That, you know, the stranger is supposed to be massively tall and the Harfoots are supposed to be massively small, more so even than the differences in height between the actual actors. You know, when you go to see the dwarves, like when an elf visits a dwarf, they really play up that difference. And so I imagine the furniture as well was sort of put into service to accentuate their size differences as well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it was a big challenge for our prop team, because they were having to make all the different scales of bags, because the rucksacks, you know, if they were carried by one character and then another character came into close contact, you'd have to have the different scales. And so we quite quickly came into a routine of having very regular show and tells. Initially, first for Kristian, to make sure that he was happy with what we were planning with the action of the scale pieces, and then we would maybe a week later do one for the showrunners and director, and so and the same with all of the scale furniture. Jason, who is head of our visual effects team, he right at the beginning gave us all very detailed talks and chats about how to deal with it. So they were always at hand to help as well. I mean, I think that's what made the whole production such, which in some circumstances, without such a supportive production team, it would have been not the great experience that it was. I mean, that's why we've all come back, because we had just so much support with all of it. And I think it shows as well, really.
Yeah, that's so many things for you to have to consider in this one series. Is not just, you know, what world this comes from and what's its history for each item, but, you know, then also doing all those scale tricks as well when it's needed. It's so wonderful to hear how well supported, because you're right, like a huge undertaking like this could be a nightmare if you did not have the right people in charge and the right people around you. Would we like to talk about the orc tent trench kind of city as they move? Because that feels like an entirely sort of constructed environment, and it's so different from every other environment in the series. It's very dirty and it's very dark. It all also feels very temporary. It's essentially very grubby campaign furniture. What was it like creating those sets, Tina?
Yeah, I loved them. Especially, I've sort of sometimes touched very similar on previous productions, and I've often found that you get inspiration from strangers of places. And I remember we happened by chance to be, we visited, I think it was the Imperial War Museum, and they were doing an exhibition on First World War and the trenches, and just how sort of dirty, disgusting. And so to imagine something worse than that, because these orcs are just, you know, they're inhumane. They don't. So we had sort of dead rats not real, but we had sort of dead rats hanging up that they looked like maybe they were using for food. And there was this, we wanted to create a whole feeling of fear, so that if you were within these trenches, that you'd feel fearful. I remember when I was a child and used to be taken to ghost trains at the fairground, and there was that similar sort of feel of round the next corner, because how Kristian had conducted the set was that you sort of went around the next corner, and I just wanted to have things like, we had a large, it was a cow that had been flailed, so you had all the skin take, it wasn't real, but and you had sort of bucket where they were collecting blood, and just so that really it was helping the actors as well to act within that world. So yeah, that was a fun set to do, and it rained as it usually does in the UK, so that helped.
Yeah, Kristian, they do really feel very like labyrinthine, these trenches. How did you have any particular inspirations for the orc constructions, I guess? What were they called?
It was just the orc camps. There are two different orc camps in the show, and they're based on the same backlot build, but we just changed it. They're actually built on top of the ground. So we built the sides. We didn't dig into the ground. But World War One is definitely a major inspiration. But we also wanted to show how the orcs live. How do they survive? How do they where are they? And then so this is a set still from a dressed set. So that's Adar's tent, and we had a beautiful interior set built on a stage. So yeah, the orcs they kind of have skins and hides and like canvases and whatever they have stolen from other from on their campaigns. They have like raided human settlements. So we also had traces of human furniture that would have been destroyed and repurposed into an orc stool or whatever. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think I wanted to make the orcs a bit cool as well. Having like they're like punks. They're like they destroy stuff, and they're not ashamed. We wanted to show that side of it as well, but also give them some kind of identity, I guess, in that we wanted them to have something to do. That there's nothing worse than seeing a bunch of people dressed up in orc costumes grunting or growling or do something kind of like in the background for no reason. So we spent a lot of time and effort, Tina and I, making sure that there was always something for people to do, whether it was boiling cows' heads in giants crates of blood or whatever.
You're right. There's so much awkward background action in the world, particularly for monsters. And this series also kind of stands out in the franchise as it humanizes the orcs quite a bit and gives you insight into their motivations and their feelings and the reason that they do what they do. And I think showing their domestic life, if you can call it that, goes a long way towards that. It really humanizes them.
That's right.
A strange question. When you know that you are making a set that is going to be seen as destroyed later on in the series, does that affect how you build or dress the set at all? That that it's all going to have to be pulverized in some way, whether that's doing duplicates of a piece of furniture to be rubblized or what?
Yes. I mean, if the set's being destroyed, you have to consider what the action's going to be and how many maybe repeats you need to build. And it depends whether that destroying is going to be seen in camera. I think for this one, I don't think we had to make repeats, did we, Kristian? Because I don't think we were seeing it sort of actually destroyed and then going back to the pristine. So
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but it's something that you have to consider. You know, you will often go down the route of designing and thinking about a set, and then you later find that they rewrite or change the action, and so something that you've created, which is ultimately going to be quite expensive, then has to be destroyed. But we didn't actually have that with this set. I think we destroyed a couple of the benches, but we weren't, because we knew we were never going back to this set. It was an easier thing to do. Look at that. I mean, it's just fantastic, because you know that scene that you've just shown then, just the vastness of that set. You know, we felt like when we were dressing it that we were in a cathedral almost. You know, it's just incredible, the staircase, and it's not very often that you get the chance to decorate a set which is, you know, just so huge and beautiful. Yeah, that was a lovely set.
And it's almost entirely built and practical, right?
Yeah,
amazing.
All of what you see here is in camera. There was one window at the end opposite the forge, you know, up in his study area. We kind of had three different levels on the set, and Tina's right. We were inspired by, you know, church architecture, but then giving it like a heavy elven tint, and I think it's actually really great how the cinematographer Alex Diesenhoff ended up shooting these last scenes, is that he just made the people really small within this big space, and I think that was really special. And you know, we were so lucky to have such an amazing team on it to make, you know, because we work very hard on these sets and the dressing and the detail, but you know, here in this scene we have time to kind of soak it all in, and it is, you know, Celebrimbor has built this temple for elven craftsmanship, and it was important that it felt really like the most important thing in his world, and it's basically falling down around him. As for the set, it can be really difficult to decide to build a set that gets destroyed, because obviously it's all plywood and plaster, and so once you chip away at the wall, it's nothing behind it, the surface. But so we did build in, pre-design the sets so that some of the columns, some of the walls had depth to it, that we can add the depth to it. But then it helped as well that we never really saw up high what, you know, what it looks like above. So actually these elements that are in the middle of the room, we're saying that came from higher up in the set that you don't see, because the big columns in there, they were too big for us to actually take down. In terms of turning, we call it turning the set around from being pre-destroyed to post-destroyed. We didn't have like weeks and weeks. It was something that Tina's, you know, and prop master John kind of did relatively quickly, as far as I remember. I mean, and I remember turning up the next morning, and I think you guys have had a team on overnight, and I was just like blown away by the detail. But again, if you look at research and have a look like World War II, like kind of churches that been bombed, like all this kind of thing, just like it's important that it's amazing how much debris is needed for it to look right. And it was like, yeah, there was a lot. There's a lot of stuff went into that set to make it look properly destroyed.
Speaking of how this was shot, how closely did you collaborate with the director of photography, and what kinds of conversations did each of you have with them, and how did that shape the work that you did for this series?
For me, I think it was unique to this job that we would have regular production meetings. about particular sets where everybody was in the same room together and looking at concepts and maybe models or 3D props that we'd sort of brought in. So everything was spoken about in great detail. So nothing was ever coming as a surprise. And then with the lighting, we produced all the lighting prior to the sets being dressed, so they could be tested and they could see what sort of shade they wanted. We painted sort of different shades and different coloured ambers, just so to get the light, correct for them. So yeah, there was a big part of that with all departments.
Did you have any particular collaboration with the costume designer on this project? I imagine that you collaborated in general with them quite a bit over the course of the series. What was that working relationship like?
Yes, no, it was very good actually. It was we had a close working relationship with Luca, and we would spend many hours with him, sort of showing him things that we were planning for our sets, and he would show us the costumes that he was planning. And again, so that was just between set deck and costume. But in these weekly production meetings, every department would show, like Kristian said, would show each department exactly, what they were doing. And even though it was, it took up a lot of what seemed like creative time, it was actually really important for us all because we did know exactly what was coming. There was no in the dark about anything. So so for us, Luca knew, the colors that we were using in all of the sets. He knew what fabrics or anything that was going to be used. Yeah, it was a good collaboration, actually. It was very good.
Yeah, there's a beautiful continuity between the style of people's costumes and the sets, and everyone really, feels like they're part of the whole world that they inhabit. And there's nothing's just there for fun or for decoration. It's all to tie the characters so much to their realm. And Kristian, I imagine that you were also collaborating very early on with the costume designer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, I would say the Stores Canyon is a very good example of that. Where we are, in Vaughan, where our little hobbit friends meet their long lost cousins from the deserts realms, and because of what they wear is pretty much the same, made out of the same material as what they make their sacks of, or what they make their chairs of, or what they make their, so that was a really great collab. And I think I probably joined 1 out of 10 meetings that Tina and Luca would have. It's such a great thing to have a collaboration going where you can do these kind of things, where Tina can go and have meetings with another HOD without, I don't have to be there because, well, I can't physically be there at all these meetings or also do the other things I have to do. But so it was, the layers of detail, and also what I loved about what both Tina was doing, but also what Luca was doing, was there's a lot of kind of natural dyes and stuff that went into this world where, trying to stay away from really kind of primal colors or strong tone, because again it's not something that would be very easily done without chemical dyes. So again, I think it's important that the costumes and the dressing and the cloths and drapery, if there's any feels at home with the stone and the whatever, if there's some gilded ore or whatever. And we haven't even talked about, the graphics department, who had 3 amazing people who did the tapestries, and, again, most of them were printed, but then painted, by hand, picked up the details in these things. but the printed tapestry, if you don't give it enough attention, and if you don't know what you're doing, which Laura, our head graphics designer, definitely does, is because she's done it for so many years, and she's so brilliant at it. She would know, no, if we print it on this canvas here, I can come in and then I can use the same dye as Tina uses in her, with her sacks or her whatever. So and the fact that we have a team that can dye things in-house, we have all these things. It's having enough people with enough different specialities that can then make all these things fit together in collaboration.
Are there any vendors that you would like to shout out specifically? I don't know if you used any SDSA business members, but if there are there any that you would like to shout out for their support on these sets?
We used a lot of the London prop houses for maybe some of the smaller pieces. Farley's, Old Times, the prop houses that generally get used. But we also used one-off people that we found that produced like Turkish vendor that produced rugs. We had Indian vendors with fabric and bits of furniture, basketware. We had glass maker, a glass blower that was based in the UK that did a lot of the glassware and bowls and things. We had potters, ceramic artists. Yeah, we had everything. Because it all had to look like it hadn't come from a factory. And you were very aware of that the whole time, that the world that we were moving in, it had to look like it had produced these pieces for it to be believable.
And Tina, you talked about a lot of different challenges on this project. What do you think was your biggest challenge overall? But then conversely, what were your greatest satisfactions or your greatest pleasures on this project?
I think the biggest challenge is always that you just want to give everybody the wow factor, so it's always sort of coming up with a prop or a set that is going to take everybody's breath away. And so I think for me, that's, there were so many sets that we were able to decorate that did have that. And I think the downside was probably that it would have been nice if we had another 8 episodes added on the end, so we could even do even more sets, because it just was such an enjoyable, fantastic time that we all had. You always get the sort of budgetary squeezes that you would get on any job, but we're all professional about it, so we're it's easy to work out what we can have and what we can't have. I think one of the big disappointments for me was that they wouldn't let us paint the horses' hooves gold that the elves were riding, the elven horses.
That would be such a cool touch.
I know, wouldn't it be great? But I can now understand, when you see that shot, that you would have had to repaint them after every take. It would have taken.
You're right. They would get so dirty in that field. It wouldn't look good for more than a second. But that would be. You're right. That would be really cool. That's such a great touch.
And we did actually go out and find all sorts of. I remember looking at some MAC makeup that could easily rub on the hooves and rub off and be ethically okay for the animals. But that's probably my big disappointment. So they didn't let us do that.
What a lovely little Easter egg too. That was a thing that could maybe have happened, but just wasn't feasible.
Well, maybe we could jemmy it in some other time, just something else.
Yeah. Maybe a hero shot for just one hero horse. Kristian, what about you? What do you feel was your biggest or your biggest challenge, I suppose, on this project? But then also, what was your greatest joy and your greatest satisfaction?
So the amount of sets that we had to do in the amount of time, and so that was quite. There was some time in prep, mid prep, not early prep, but mid prep, when I was like, okay, this is, I would
Oh,
like
that point where they
another
start to
4 weeks.
pile up on you.
Yeah, I would like another
Yeah.
3 weeks just to think about this set, but there's like, no, we need to start building it in 3 weeks. So you need to finish the design like tomorrow, or the idea, not the design, because obviously I have a fantastic, amazing group of art directors and set, set designers, as you call it over there. In that, it is just, it's the idea, and then being careful enough to make sure that you adhere to the idea. So what was the original idea? So sometimes you go on a journey and you have so many different sets that you're working on at the same time, and then you can easily drop the ball in terms of where are we running with this particular set. And I think I don't have any big regrets of anything that we made. I think I'm immensely proud of the show. I think it looks amazing, and I had such a good time working on it. So the only thing I would agree with Tina is that sometimes we built amazing sets and people put so much work on it, and then we didn't really see it enough, because it's just the nature of the show is that you go quickly. It's a big expansive world, and it's just, and so I would have liked to have spent more time in Kieran's boathouse. I could have spent a couple of, like, what do you call them, those episodes that don't really go anywhere.
Bottle episodes.
A bottle episode. Yeah, I think we should have had a bottle episode in the Kieran's boathouse. Because again, there's like the amount of detail that went into this, and all the planes and the chisel, not chisel, yeah, all of it is just like the saws. But yeah, so I think that's the thing, is that it's both the great challenge and the scope of this production, but also then that you could have spent a lot more time in many of these sets and still wanting more, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I certainly hope that I hope that, Tina, that you'll get lots more time to work in this world, and I think that we've had a lovely conversation, and thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fantastic and really enlightening conversation with both of you. I want to thank you so much for your time, and also thank you for doing such amazing work on this series. It's been a real joy. It's just been a gift to the franchise and to Lord of the Rings fans who have really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.